Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going, and as I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. Today is a fateful day for the United States of America, and I want to turn directly to the Supreme Court. Let me remind you of the wording of the 14th Amendment, Section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. I just wanted to read you that one line because we are going to find out today whether the so-called literalists are in fact going to judge the question of birthright citizenship as the Constitution, as amended, has determined. Let's remind everybody that established law is something that is subject to the determination of the Supreme Court. Remember that once upon a time, a case called Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, determined that separate but equal was the way to go in terms of civil rights laws in this country. And then came Brown versus the Board of Education, and the Supreme Court reversed Plessy and said, no, under Brown versus the Board of Education, you cannot have separate but equal facilities in the United States. It was a revolution. The same thing happened 3 years and a few days ago when the Supreme Court took an established law, Roe v. Wade, and overturned it. It was a very simple, very direct interpretation of the law. The question becomes, what will happen today? Now, let's be clear. We have now defined the Supreme Court not as merely a place where decisions are made in a fair and impartial fashion. Rather, we now understand the Supreme Court has a partisan makeup. I go back to Bush v. Gore in the year 2000, when the Supreme Court, by a vote of 5-4, made the decision that George W. Bush would become president of the United States instead of Al Gore. And I want to remind you that Al Gore spoke to the nation when the decision came out. And although Al Gore disagreed with the decision, he accepted it because he said that the Supreme Court does establish the law of the land. What is the role of the Supreme Court? It is to interpret the Constitution. It is to make final rulings. And the question becomes, what will the Supreme Court do today on the last day of its term? This may be the most consequential day that we have faced in the court in the last 3 years. And I have chosen, although there are a number of cases which are before the court and where we will hear major decisions today, I have chosen birthright citizenship as the example. What will Alito and Thomas, the most conservative justices on the court, do? How will they interpret the 14th Amendment? They have been called literalists for years. They say you have to interpret the Constitution as it is written. Well, clearly, that is not the case in the case of Alito and Thomas. And the question now will be, will they stick to their guns and be literalists even if they disagree with the general trend? Or will they vote to overturn Article 14, Section 1 of the Constitution? We know what the liberals will do, and let's be clear. We understand on the court there is a division, that there are liberals and there are conservatives. But what happens when you have a Chief Justice like the late Earl Warren, former governor of California, Republican nominee for Vice President of the United States in 1948, and of course the man who, as Attorney General of the state of California, was responsible for the internment of the Japanese. Chief Justice Warren was able to craft Brown versus the Board of Education and get unanimity among his 9, in those days, brethren. So now we will hear this morning decisions that affect us on birthright citizenship. We know that there are people who refer to anchor babies, mothers who come to this country to have their children so that they become citizens of the United States. The 14th Amendment guarantees that right. My suggestion is that what should have happened is if those on the court and those in the conservative movement wanted to change the Constitution, they should have proposed a constitutional amendment. Now, you and I know they didn't do that because that constitutional amendment would never have passed. And so, into the hands of 9 individuals, justices of the United States Supreme Court, on the last day of this term, falls a decision. Will the Constitution, as it now stands, be upheld, or will the ruling be changed? And I want to tell you, I'm also going to look at dissents. I want to know if on the 14th Amendment, on birthright citizenship, there are dissents. I want to know what those dissents are. Now, you may say to me, but John, there's so much going on in the world. Why are you focusing on the United States Supreme Court? And the simple answer is because in this country, we are ruled by law. Sometimes we agree with a Supreme Court decision. Sometimes we disagree with the Supreme Court decision. But in the end, as Al Gore demonstrated, we have to obey the court. Otherwise, we will descend into chaos. But make no mistake, and I want to be clear about this, during all of the presidential campaigns which I have covered, basically since 1996 on the air, I have pointed out that when you elect a president, you are not merely electing a president, because the President of the United States nominates justices to the United States Supreme Court. And we now know that who is president matters. I always remember Shirley Breyer Black, who was the aunt of Stephen Breyer, now a retired Supreme Court justice. And Shirley used to remind me repeatedly that if Al Gore had won in 2000, that Breyer would no doubt have become the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and the course of our history would have been profoundly different. So today, like all of you, I wait breathlessly for the Supreme Court decisions. As I record this podcast, those decisions have not yet come down, but they will shortly, and we will be waiting and watching and hoping that American democracy, that birthright citizenship, that the basic foundations of our republic are upheld by this Supreme Court. So there will be more, and we'll just have to wait and see what the court does. I am John Rothman. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World. Make sure to follow along. Let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which is, of course, our goal. We welcome your feedback, and of course that comes from LinkedIn, Facebook, and my direct email. Please do let me know what you think. This is going to be a dramatic ere of the 4th of July. That's right, we are on the eve of celebrating our nation's independence, and with so much going on, what the Supreme Court says and does will have a huge impact on all of us. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say, and of course, I'll be back on Monday, right here. And I want to thank Gogo Zoger for being the wonderful producer of this program. Gogo, have a great 4th of July. I'll still be here on the 4th of July. I'm not taking the day off. And to all of you, have a great weekend. And if you're celebrating Pride here in San Francisco. Let's do it with joy and peace. See you on Monday.